Louis Keumayou is in Paris. He's a journalist and president of the African Information Club. Temi Ibirogba is with us here in the studio. She's a program and research associate for the Africa program at the Center for International Policy. Joining us from Berkeley, California, Ugo Nwekeji is associate professor of African American Studies and former director of the Center for African Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. And Alkasim Abdulkadir joins us from Abuja in Nigeria. He's a freelance journalist and public affairs commentator. Welcome to all of you to the show. Let us start in Paris with Louis Keumayou. And Louis, as we just heard from our reporter there, the new president, or the president now taking his second term, Muhammadu Buhari, he'll face some formidable challenges, economic and security. Have you seen anything of a blueprint, of a plan to move ahead to meet these challenges?
Well, there are several issues. First of all, security, because when you are a huge and big economy like Nigeria, you have to face that issue to make sure the investors who are coming in your country will feel themselves safe. And also those who are working there, your fellow citizens, will feel themselves safe when going to work. So I think it is a huge matter for him to solve the economic, the security problem. Then you have the diversification of the economy. Even if Nigeria is rich, it is rich because of petroleum. And Nigeria needs to diversify the economy to not be dependent only from petroleum and all that industry. And the third one is probably the African integration. It's a big country with a big population, and there is a free trade zone that is taking place in Africa. And so it is important for Nigeria to have his speech understood on the field in Africa on all those issues.
Alkasim, Louis Keumayou just told us there how these two major issues in Nigeria, security and the economy, are so interconnected, because foreign investors will be looking for a place that is safe where they could put their money. What do you make of Buhari's first term? Is there anything he did right in the first term? What did he do right in the first term that he could carry into the second?
I think one of the major points that he campaigned in 2015 was the issue of security. And when you look at tackling of the Boko Haram insurgency, I think he has done primarily a good job, but he needs to do more. For example, when Buhari came to power, Boko Haram was holding 17 local government areas, which are like local counties in Borno State and some parts of the Northeast. Talking about the economy, one of the biggest challenges that President Buhari faces is the level of poverty in Nigeria. As at the time he took over power, there was 90 million people in abject poverty. However, that number has reduced drastically to about 87 million now. And he has social plans which are targeting the poorest of the poor, whereby they're giving grants. And we hope that in the coming years, the number keeps on reducing and it's no longer the poverty capital of the world.
Ugo Nwekeji, President Buhari launched his Economic Recovery and Growth Plan in 2017. That plan was drawn up in 2016. What are his priorities right now? Does that plan still hold water for what he wants to do in Nigeria at this time? We see a lot of inequality in the country, a lot of corruption. He's got to choose what he wants to do first. What are his priorities?
His priorities should include tackling the security situation in the country. Boko Haram is still a big menace in the south, in the northeast. They still attack military bases and military convoy. And not only Boko Haram, the thing is that since Buhari has come to power, the security situation overall in the country has deteriorated. Apart from the Boko Haram insurgency continuing to be a problem, there has been a generalized security breakdown everywhere in the country, particularly in the north, other parts of the north, not just the northeast. The northwest is experiencing the most serious security crisis that part of Nigeria has ever faced throughout history.
Temi, let's bring it to the studio. What is your reading of the situation? What will you be looking for in these first few months of Buhari's second term?
Yeah, so when Buhari was elected in 2015, he promised to focus on three main things. Those pillars were the economy, security, specifically the fight against Boko Haram, and then corruption. So in order to predict what's going to happen in his next term, it's very helpful to kind of look at the past 4 years and see what happened. So in terms of the economy, in 2018, Nigeria surpassed India as the country with the largest population of people living in extreme poverty. So what does that mean? This means that nearly half of Nigeria's population is living on around $1.90 or under that a day. So then looking at Nigeria's GDP, the country is experiencing what some people have called a middle-class brain drain. So what does that mean? It means that Nigerians tend to immigrate abroad to the West, to countries like Canada, the US, England, etc. Their children grow up in these countries, become highly educated, get good jobs, but their parents are very unlikely to encourage them to move back to Nigeria after all of this. How come? Because they're looking at their counterparts in Nigeria who are educated in Nigeria. There are no jobs for them. So it's very unlikely for these parents to want their children to go back. And this means that the GDP of Nigeria is at a standstill because you don't have the diaspora who have all these education and skills, re-energizing Nigeria's GDP and Nigeria's economy, and then you also don't have any jobs in the actual country for the people living there who are educated there. So I think if Buhari was smart, he would make a focus on the diaspora. In 2015, the Nigerian diaspora poured in around $21 billion into the economy. This was through travel, tourism, sending money back home to their families. So there's a huge potential there. And also looking at the cultural aspect of Nigeria.
Yeah, but the point is, Temi, how does he do that? Because it seems to be a bit of a vicious cycle here, isn't it?
Yeah.
People won't come back because the economy's not doing well, but it'll do well if they do come back. How does he break that cycle?
Yeah, so I think focusing on the diaspora is a really huge way in saying, okay, this is a place where we're having economic prosperity. The diaspora is pouring a lot more money back in. So how do I make the most out of this situation? I think they need to be very technical and smart about this. Also looking at elements like the cultural boom that cities like Lagos are experiencing right now around the world. Lagos has the potential to exercise a soft power because people are very much interested in our arts, our fashion, all these different things that are going on. So I think Buhari should very much make the most of these elements of the economy.
Louis, if we look at the Nigerian economy right now, it earns 70% of its income from oil, but as we all know, oil prices have been fluctuating over the last few years. And if you add to that, there's a World Bank estimate that says that Nigeria's growth this year will be around 2.2%. The country has unemployment running at about 20%. Where does Buhari even begin to start fixing that?
I think the issues are about how to diversify the economy, first of all. And after doing that, I think the second issue that is really very important is fighting corruption. Because even when you are producing a lot, when you have such a lot of inequalities, and on top of that, you have also corruption, it is really difficult to obtain some results. So I think he has to fight, first of all, the security issue, then he has to diversify the economy, but he cannot afford the question of the corruption. It's a very serious matter. And if we consider the fact that Nigeria is now surrounded with countries who depend on Nigeria, economically speaking, and who are facing lots of troubles concerning security, I mean, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, Benin now, it's a lot for Nigeria alone. So they need to fight in way to have equality, to have less corruption before starting other buildings and achievements.
Alkasim, Temi just raised some important facts here about the situation in Nigeria. As she pointed out, Nigeria has now overtaken India as the country with the highest number of people living in extreme poverty. As she pointed out, about 100 million people, half of Nigeria's population, are living on $1.90 a day or even less. This in a country which has Africa's highest GDP. Why has there been such a failure in Nigeria to translate this wealth into better living standards for the country?
If you look at the pre-Buhari years, the poverty rates at that time were hovering around 112 million people in extreme poverty. while 90 million of those 112 million in extreme poverty at the bottom rung of the ladder. However, what we have seen in the last 4 years is that the government has come up with strategies to combat extreme poverty. One of them is the social investment program, whereby the poorest of the poor have been targeted with grants of about $30. $30 might seem like a very, very infinitesimal amount of money, but however, when you're targeting the poorest of the poor, it is a considerable amount of money. And also the minimum wage. Nigeria has an extremely low minimum wage in Africa when you try to put it against its peers. However, in the last couple of months, we have seen President Buhari also increasing minimum wage from 18,000 naira to about 30,000 naira, which is approximately $50. One hopes that these increments with the social investment program and all that will lift some millions of people out of poverty, and we're hoping that in the next couple of years, more strategies will go into social investment that will enhance social cohesion, and we will see a lot of more people getting out of poverty.
Ugo Nwekeji, on the issue of corruption, President Buhari has done something about it in his first term, but I'm wondering if he'll get a little bit stronger on his crackdown on corruption in the second term. He's talked about it. This is what he had to say just earlier this week. Let's watch.
My frustration is that we cannot move faster in prosecuting and punishing the really big corrupt. We made some progress. We recovered a number of assets, fixed assets, and money in banks, including in Europe and America. But under this system, you can't be too much in a hurry.
So, Ugo, there we heard the president telling us there that some progress has been made. Some of the funds in corruption has been recovered, but he says you can't move too much in a hurry. There's the bureaucracy to take care of as well. I mean, if you look at Nigeria, it's 144 out of 175 countries on the scale of corruption, that scale put together by Transparency International. But what do you make of the president saying that it's going to be tough?
Well, I think that he has been saying that now for some time. What Buhari should do is, first of all, to try to basically raise people's confidence, to make people believe in that anti-corruption fight. He needs to actually change his paradigm. He needs to show that this corruption fight, anti-corruption fight, is genuine by going after, corrupt people in general, not just as seen by many people as only people who oppose him. And also seen to be shielding some people who are known to be very corrupt, including the governor of Kano State, who is one of the most important political allies. How can a man like Buhari say he's fighting corruption and still be the most close political ally to a governor seen on video collecting millions of dollars in bribe money? The government needs to address these serious issues. So the anti-corruption fight has been a calling card of the regime. But we need to know, yes, fighting corruption in Nigeria is incredibly important, which is why I hope that Buhari will face it with seriousness. But, that doesn't seem to be the case. A lot of money has been recovered. Nigerians want to know what this money was used for. And then too much fixation, too much fixation on corruption has actually made Nigerians to forget other problems we have. The problems Nigeria have is not only corruption, but actually trying to do things properly across the board.
Right.
The government should target excellence. The government should demand excellence. Everybody should demand excellence. There should be a cultural shift to excellence. Right. Because Nigerians accept substandard products at every level.
Okay. Temi, if we look at how Buhari gets the Nigerian economy on track, as Louis told us earlier on, one of the things he has to do is diversify the economy. He's got to start that process. Some economists have said, for instance, that he's got to implement some kind of massive infrastructure program that'll create employment, it'll bring money into the country. Of course, that means he's going to have to borrow money, because resources in the country have been dwindling. China has been playing a role in that. China's been involved in Nigeria, especially in the tech sector, and also through the China Export Bank. What kind of a role could a country like China play in getting this economy going?
Yeah, I know. So looking at things like the Belt and Road Initiative and everything that China is doing around the world, it's very clear that they're going to play a really strong hand in developing a lot of African nations, especially ones that are dealing with debt, with economic issues. But I think the key thing for Buhari to focus on is making sure that China and all these other foreign investors aren't just flying people in to work in Nigeria, that you're also finding a way to give Nigerians jobs, because that's what's actually going to help the economy. If you're just bringing people in to build all these things, to build all these roads, it's not actually going to help the working man, the everyday man in Nigeria. So I think he needs to be very insightful about the way he does it, and he needs to put the working man first.
Louis, how important will foreign investment be for Nigeria at this time as it tries to diversify its economy, especially from countries like China?
Well, I think Nigeria is looking for a win-win cooperation with its partners. And I think on that field, China can bring a huge help, especially in the new technologies, also in funding, for example, and transferring technologies from Western countries. We haven't seen it, but from China, maybe that will come and help Nigeria to have new technologies that can help at the same time its economy and its youth in the field of economy, in the field also of employment, and in the field of being in the artificial intelligence competition in the world. So I think China can bring a lot, Nigeria also, but we think China can bring something really interesting in the growth of the Nigerian economy in Africa.
Alkasim, if you look at one of the problems Nigeria is facing, it's a security problem which is linked to other problems, and that is the ethnic violence that we are seeing between farmers and herders in some parts of Nigeria. It's forced about 20,000 Nigerians to flee into neighboring Niger to escape this violence. It's linked in some way to the fact that grazing land in that part of Nigeria is dropping all the time, and that because of climate change. So what is Nigeria doing about this? Of course, countries throughout the world are dealing with the challenge of climate change. What is Nigeria doing?
There are several strategies to dealing with the farmer-herder clashes in Nigeria. Some of them border on peace-building efforts, and some of them also border on regreening the environment. So, for example, there's the Green Wall Project. The Green Wall Project seeks to regreen areas and plant trees, encourage forestation from across states like Sokoto up until the Lake Chad basins. This has been going on in the last 10 years, whereby millions of seedlings are handed over to local villages so that they can replant their immediate environment. So also there have been a lot of town hall meetings in order to build peace across communities to enhance social cohesion, because in as much as it is okay to police these communities, if the people are not told to come together to bury the hatchets and to ensure that they live peacefully, then there's really nothing can be done. In terms of legislation, a lot also is being done in terms of ensuring that the grazing lands come back, because in the past there used to be grazing parts, but urbanization has really disturbed that, and right now there are legislations to ensure that the grazing parts do come back.
You know, Temi, I looked at some of the figures for the Nigerian election. Turnout was something like just over 30%, about 33%, I think. That's pretty low. Is there a lot of apathy in the country?
Yeah, so I think the fact that the elections was postponed, that was a huge thing that Nigerians were very disappointed in, the fact that it was postponed the day that the polls were meant to open as well. You had people traveling in from outside of Nigeria to vote, and also within Nigeria, people traveling to their home states just so they could vote. They took days off from work, and then when the election was postponed by a week, they weren't able to or they weren't able to vote in the next round. So it just made it very difficult for them, and that's why the voter turnout was lower.
Right. So, Ugo, the president has now been sworn in. He's a president for the next term as well. What is the first marker you'll be looking for from this president?
I would expect him to work very hard in stabilizing the security situation in the country. That is urgent because you cannot have stability, economic growth, and development in the face of such security crisis everywhere in the country. That would show off confidence because FDI levels, foreign direct investment in Nigeria is very low. And that is why, also this relationship with China becomes particularly important at this time. So that is one, that stabilizes the security situation and targeting economic growth to create wealth.
Right.
And at the same time, work very seriously to address climate change.
Yeah.
The way the government, because people have been talking about this, security situation relating to herdsmen. And you made a very good point by saying that Nigeria is not the only country in the world facing this situation of climate change. But why is it in Nigeria that the herdsmen menace has been so much? Yeah. One correlation you find in all this is that this menace has increased tremendously under Buhari. So Buhari is directly responsible for some of this menace happening. Right. But apart from that, his model, his approach to the economy, has me concerned in some ways. Yeah. Because his model to the economy is about extraction. Drill more oil, explore, spend billions of dollars looking for oils, even where engineers tell us they don't exist. And then tax, people. So the government should think about creating wealth and going into alternative energy, promoting alternative energy rather than trying to look for more oil. Okay, Ugo. Where they are not. It's not a responsible way to spend money.
Right, okay, Ugo. We're going to have to leave it there. We have run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. But before we go, a reminder to check out our podcast. You can listen through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. So give us a listen and be sure to subscribe. Search online for CGTN and The Heat podcast. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.